few weeks ago, I sketched up this cozy Yeti character design and now I want to bring it to life. So let's see if we can transform this 2D sketch into a 3D sculpture. But before we can do that, we need a 3D model. So let's jump into Nomad Sculpt on my iPad and get to work. First things first, I like to use a sphere to form the basic head shape. Then, once it's looking fairly even, we can map out the facial features using the deflate tool and some extra shapes. During a sculpture's early stages, keeping all of the components simple and separate is key. It's very rare to get the shapes and proportions correct the first time around, so being able to reshape or remove them individually is very useful. Frequently rotating the model after making any changes is also very important, as an alteration that looks good from the front might not work from the side. Now that we've given this Yeti some fangs, nostrils, and eyeliner, we can get to work on the igloo beanie, which I'm going to make using a semi-sphere and the mask tool. To form the bricks of ice that this hat is made from, I've chosen to sketch them on using the mask tool, extract them into a slightly raised pattern, and then use the inflate tool to squish them together. And I must say, not only was this the most satisfying step ever, but I'm extremely happy with how it looks. Also, inflating the bricks like this instead of manually stacking them up saved so much time. Right, let's get to work on this Yeti's spiky hair. After using the mask tool to extrude a scalp, I'm going in with various tubes to form the spikes. I like to use tubes for hairstyles like this, as you can create a sharp point by simply reducing the radius at the end. Plus, being able to reshape and angle each tube into the perfect position really makes me feel like a hairdresser. Now, after adding these smaller details like the irises, glasses, earrings, button badges, and a wall mount hole in the back of the skull, we can send this cozy Yeti off to my 3D printer. Roughly 9 hours later, all of the components for our Yeti sculpture have been fully printed, but there's a slight issue. It may be hard to see on camera, but there are some extremely prominent layer lines across her face and her hat, and I did try my best to minimize them, but due to the nature of filament printing, there was only so much I could do. Not to worry though, this is nothing that some surface preparation can't fix. First up, let's smooth out the most prominent lines using some rough sandpaper. When 3D printing sculptures like this, the filament color that I choose to print the head in doesn't matter too much since it will be painted over later, but using a darker color like this can make the sanding process simpler, as you can see where you've worked. This isn't totally foolproof, however, as some scratches and dents are still hiding. So let's paint on some grey brush-on primer to even out the color and reveal further imperfections. After allowing this brush-on primer to fully dry, I can now see that the edges of the irises and the high spots of this Yeti's face still require some sanding. So let's smooth these down and finish off the surface prep with a generous coat of white spray primer. This spray primer should nicely fill in any remaining layer lines and provide a clean, even base for the paint to adhere to. Speaking of which, let's begin to paint. To paint this Yeti's light blue skin tone, I'm going to use a combination of Vallejo model paints and Liquitex slow dry fluid. This combination is a staple within my studio as it's super reliable and the colour payoff is fantastic. It's amazing how such a small amount of additive can alter the texture of the paint, making it so much easier to outline these edges. I will say though, if you want to try slow dry fluid for yourself, try to use a small amount. Mixing too much of it in will make the paint sheer and a bit patchy. Right, this blue skin tone is looking nice and vibrant, so let's move on to the igloo beanie, and I've mixed up a lighter ice blue shade for this section. I'm also not too worried about this igloo being painted perfectly, as we'll go back in later to add some shading. Okay, whilst we wait for the skin tone and the hat to fully dry, let's use a black acrylic marker pen for this Yeti's eyes and eyeliner. If you've seen any of my previous sculpture projects, then you'll know that black eyes and eyeliner are my go-to. It's simple, but it really helps to make the face look super cartoony. And now for the super thin lines and the eyelashes, I'm going to switch to some black paint on a small paintbrush. This step takes extreme concentration and a super steady hand, so I'm using a fairly dry brush to almost scuff them onto the surface. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far and you'd like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. The love that you guys have shown me this year has been overwhelming and I cannot thank you all enough. Okay, let's take a quick break from painting the face to work on my favourite detail, the igloo beanie. Instead of keeping warm in the winter, I like to imagine that this cozy Yeti tries their best to stay cold. So, freezing their head with an ice block hat is the best course of action. To really emphasise the frosty ice block effect that I'm going for, I've decided to use soft pastels and a paintbrush to create subtle gradients in between each brick. A light dusting of blue pastels goes a very long way on top of this pale base. Also, I'm not too sure which brand of soft pastels these are, as I've had them for over 10 years now, but most soft pastels should work the same if you're wanting to try this method for yourself. Now that these bricks have been fully contoured, let's use a tiny drop of white model paint to dry brush some highlights into place. Dry brushing should create a super soft gradient in the center, completing the frosty effect. Plus, since some of these igloo blocks are uneven, the highlights should emphasize imperfections perfectly. Okay, last but not least, I'm now filling in some of the gaps with a blue coloring pencil. This extra sharp shadow should help the ice bricks look a bit more crisp. Perfect. I am seriously happy with this igloo beanie. The soft pastel gradients have really brought it to life. And speaking of which, let's breathe some life into this Yeti by finishing up their face. For the lips, I'm drawing on a rough lip line using the same blue pencil that I used for the igloo. This can then be filled in with a mixture of light blue, red and pink model paints. When creating lip shades for non-human skin colours like this, matching the undertones is essential. In this case, mixing in a small amount of light blue paint cools down the warm red and pink tones, resulting in a rosy yet cool shade. Also, sorry for the blurry filming in this section, it totally slipped my mind that autofocus focuses automatically. Now that these lips have been fully filled in, let's go in with a darker blue shade for the chin line, nostrils and earrings. These facial lines are some of my favourite details when it comes to painting sculptures. They really help to emphasise the cartoony look that I'm trying to achieve. Right, whilst we wait for this face to fully dry, let's move on to the pin badges. As you can see within my original illustration, this Yeti's igloo beanie has 3 pin badges attached to it. This one features a footprint, this one features a mountain, and this one is plain white to symbolise a snowball. And although I did actually print these pin badges alongside the face earlier on, they were also affected by the dreaded layer lines, so I've decided to reprint them. Not only are these ones flat on top, which looks much cleaner, but the white filament that I have chosen to use should be much easier to paint. Let's attach these to a popsicle stick and get to work. And there we go. Super simple and ready to be attached to the igloo beanie, but before we can do that, we need to give this Yeti some glasses. Just like the pin badges, the glasses that I printed alongside the Yeti's head were far from perfect. So I've made them again with separate arms. Keeping these arms separate should prevent breakages whilst I work on the front section using Milliput. Milliput is a 2-part epoxy putty that hardens once it's fully cured, and it's the perfect solution to smoothing out any support defects. After pressing the Milliput into place, allowing it to fully cure, and using a basic nail file to clean up any rough edges, we've now got a perfectly prepped surface ready for painting. I'm going to use the same red acrylic marker pen that I used for the footprint badge for some extra colour continuity. Now that the glasses and my fingers have been fully painted, we can use a small drop of super glue to fix the arms into place. And I must say, I'm extremely happy with these frames. Not only do they perfectly fit the contours of her nose and ears, but this bright red is so punchy against the light blue skin tone. I love it. So far, we've made the head, badges, and glasses for this Yeti sculpture, but there's still a very important detail that is missing, and that is the pom-pom. No igloo beanie would be complete without a snowball-style pom-pom, so let's get to work. Now, I won't lie, it has been years since I made a pom-pom, so I had to look up a tutorial, and this one from Sheep and Stitch on YouTube was my video of choice. All we have to do is make 2 cardboard donuts, carefully wrap the wool around them, chop the wool in half, secure everything with a knot, and that's it. One perfectly round pom-pom ready to sit on top of an igloo beanie. Let's put everything into place and see how our cozy Yeti sculpture has turned out. And here they are. This cozy Yeti sculpture is finally complete and I am thrilled with the finished result. The way that these glasses perfectly fit her face is great. Also, her underbite, fangs, and spiky hairstyle translated into 3D extremely well. Overall, I think it's very fair to say that this is my new favourite sculpture. But before I go, I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. Also, if you have an idea for a character design sculpture, do let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more projects like this one, then please consider subscribing. My new goal is 120,000 subscribers. I wonder if we can reach this before February. Right, I will see you in the next video.